I never imagined I'd be telling this story. Not because I'm ashamed of what I did, God knows I'm not, but because I genuinely believed I'd built something unbreakable 5 years of marriage. A 3-bedroom house in the kind of neighborhood where people actually wave at each other. An HVAC business that kept the bills paid and then some, and her, Sarah, the woman everyone said I was lucky to have landed. "You really outkicked your coverage with that one," my buddy Mike would say, nudging me at barbecues while she held court with the other wives, her laugh carrying across the yard like wind chimes. Beautiful. Social. The kind of woman who could make sweatpants look intentional and elegant. When she'd link her arm through mine at company dinners, I'd catch other men looking, not at her, but at me, wondering what the hell I had that they didn't. What I had was loyalty, blind, stupid loyalty. Our mornings had a rhythm. I'd be up at 5:30, showering quietly while she slept diagonal across our king-size bed, taking up space like she owned it, which I suppose she thought she did. Coffee, toast, maybe a glance at her sleeping form before heading out for another 10-hour day crawling through dusty attics and cramped basements. She'd text me around noon, usually something sweet. "Missing you. Can't wait for dinner." Little hearts and kiss emojis that made the sweat and grime worth it. She stayed home. Her choice. "I want to make our house a home," she'd told me before the wedding, her eyes bright with what I thought was sincerity. And for a while, she did. Dinner was usually ready when I got home. The house smelled like vanilla candles, and whatever she'd been baking, we'd eat together, talk about nothing important, then settle into the couch for whatever show we were binging. But somewhere around year 3, things shifted. Not dramatically, just enough to notice if you were paying attention. Her errands started taking longer. The grocery store became a 3-hour expedition. Target turned into an all-day event. She joined a gym but never seemed to sweat when she came home, started showering the moment she walked in the door, even if she'd just been at her sister's. The phone was the first real red flag I ignored. She used to leave it anywhere. Kitchen counter, coffee table, bathroom sink. Now it was always with her face down, on silent. She'd angle it away when responding to texts, tilting her body like she was shielding state secrets. When it rang, she'd glance at the screen and silence it. "Spam," she'd say, but spam doesn't make you smile like that. I told myself I was being paranoid. This is what happens when you work too much, when you're tired, when you start seeing problems that aren't there. Every marriage has phases. She was probably just going through something. Maybe she was depressed. Maybe it was me. Maybe I'd become boring, predictable, too comfortable in our routine. The house felt different too. Our bedroom, the sanctuary I'd painted her favorite shade of blue, started feeling like a hotel room. She'd reorganized everything, moved things around for no reason. New throw pillows appeared that I wasn't allowed to actually use. A new perfume materialized on her dresser, something floral and foreign that made my nose itch. When I asked about it, she said, "Mom gave it to me last year. Just started using it." But her mom had been dead for 2 years and we both knew it. Then came that night in October. I'd finished a job early, a simple AC repair that the customer had made sound like a 5-alarm emergency. Instead of grabbing a beer with the guys, I decided to surprise her. Maybe we'd order Chinese, watch a movie, remember why we'd fallen in love in the first place. I walked in through the garage, quietly, not wanting to startle her. That's when I heard her voice floating from the kitchen, low, intimate, punctuated by these little giggles I hadn't heard in months, the kind of laugh that comes from your belly, the kind you can't fake. She was whispering, but the tone was unmistakable. Flirting. My wife was flirting with someone at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday while I was supposed to be working. I stood in the hallway, my work boots still on, tool bag still in my hand, listening to my wife talk to someone the way she used to talk to me. When I finally walked into the kitchen, she spun around, phone clutched to her chest like armor. "You're home early," she said. And for the first time in our marriage, she didn't sound happy about it. That night was the first time I wondered who was she laughing for, because it sure as hell wasn't me. After that night in the kitchen, I became a detective in my own home. Not consciously at first, just noticing things. The way she'd tense up when my truck pulled into the driveway, how she started doing laundry obsessively, sometimes running the washer for a single shirt, the new password on her laptop. For security, she explained when I asked, like we'd ever worried about security before. Her girls' nights multiplied, Wednesdays with Jennifer, Fridays with her book club, though she never seemed to be reading anything. Saturday brunches that stretched into dinners. When I asked to join once, just to be social, she looked at me like I'd suggested burning the house down. "It's girls only, babe. You'd be bored," she said with a forced smile. I started keeping track of the inconsistencies. Said she was at Target but came home with Walmart bags. Claimed she was at her sister's, but her sister called looking for her. The mileage on her car didn't match her stories. 40 miles for a trip to the gym that was 3 miles away. When I mentioned it casually, she had an answer ready. "I went for a drive after. Needed to clear my head." "Is that a crime?" She shot back defensively. Everything became a fight. "Why are you questioning me?" she'd demand. "Don't you trust me? Are you really going to be one of those controlling husbands?" She'd turn it around on me, make me feel like the crazy one. "You're working too much," she'd say, rubbing my shoulders while I sat at the kitchen table, staring at credit card statements I didn't recognize. "You're stressed. You're seeing things that aren't there." But I wasn't imagining the new lingerie in her drawer, tags removed but never worn for me. I wasn't imagining the unfamiliar men's hoodie in our laundry that she claimed belonged to the neighbor's kid who left it by our fence when he was playing basketball. We didn't have a basketball hoop. The neighbor's kid was 7 years old. The hoodie was an extra large. She started locking doors. The bedroom door when she changed, something she'd never done in 5 years. The bathroom door when she showered, even when I wasn't home. I'd noticed the lock was turned when I'd return. She'd sleep on the edge of the bed, curled away from me like I was contaminated. When I'd reach for her, she'd flinch. "I'm just tired," became her constant refrain. The whispered calls continued, always after she thought I was asleep, always in the kitchen or the guest bathroom. I'd lie in bed, straining to hear, catching fragments. "He doesn't suspect. Tomorrow at 2. I miss you too." Each word was a knife between my ribs, but I still didn't have proof. Just suspicion eating me alive from the inside. My neighbor, Tom, mentioned something one afternoon while I was mowing the lawn. "Sarah's been having some car trouble, huh?" he asked casually. When I looked confused, he continued, "Just noticed that black Camaro parked by your fence a few times during the day. Figured she was getting help with her car." Sarah drove a white Honda. She didn't know anyone with a black Camaro. At least, she'd never mentioned it. The gaslighting intensified. When I'd bring up concerns, she'd cry. Real tears, the kind that made me feel like a monster. "How can you think that about me?" she'd sob, "after everything we've been through?" She'd remind me of the miscarriage we'd suffered in year 2, how she'd held my hand through my dad's death, how she'd supported my business when everyone said I was crazy to go out on my own. She weaponized our history against my instincts. The cologne was the breaking point. She came home from book club on a Thursday night, sliding into bed at 11:30, thinking I was asleep. But I was wide awake, and I could smell him on her, not just cologne, though that was there, something expensive and woody that I'd never wear, but the scent of another person, sweat that wasn't hers, intimacy that wasn't ours. She showered immediately the next morning, but the evidence was already seared into my memory. Her hair had been wrong. Her lipstick smudged, despite claiming she'd removed it hours ago. A small bruise on her neck that she'd cover with concealer, thinking I wouldn't notice. I lay there that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe, and realized I was sharing a bed with a stranger. The woman I'd married was gone, replaced by this creature who lied as easily as she breathed, who could look me in the eyes over breakfast and tell me she loved me while another man's scent still lingered in her hair. That smell wasn't mine. And in that moment, I knew. I needed evidence. Not guesses. Evidence. I bought the cameras online during my lunch break, sitting in my truck outside a Wendy's, my hands surprisingly steady as I clicked Add to Cart. 3 units small, discreet. The kind that looked like everyday objects, a phone charger, a smoke detector, a clock radio, express shipping. They'd arrive while Sarah was at her sister's on Wednesday. Installing them felt like betraying everything I believed about marriage, but she'd already burned those beliefs to ash. I placed one in our bedroom, disguised as the new alarm clock I told her I'd bought, because the old one kept losing time. One went in the hallway, tucked into an air vent I'd been meaning to fix for months. The last one covered the garage entrance. If someone was coming into my house, I'd know exactly when and how. The first few days of footage were mundane torture. Hours of Sarah doing nothing, scrolling through her phone on the couch, dancing alone in the bedroom to music I couldn't hear, taking naps in the middle of the day. Part of me hoped I'd been wrong, that I'd wasted $300 on cameras that would only prove my paranoia. Then Thursday came. She kissed me goodbye that morning, tasting like coffee and lies. "Grocery shopping today," she announced. "Maybe Home Depot for those bathroom fixtures you wanted me to look at." She was wearing ratty sweatpants and one of my old work shirts, hair in a messy bun, no makeup. The uniform of a wife running errands. I was under a house in Riverside, sweat dripping into my eyes, when my phone buzzed with the motion alert. 10:47 a.m. garage entrance. I couldn't check it immediately. Mrs. Thomas was hovering, asking about her ductwork, but my mind was already racing. At lunch, I sat in my truck and opened the app with trembling fingers. There she was, coming through the garage, but not alone. A man followed her, tall, athletic, wearing a black hoodie despite the 70-degree weather. She was laughing, pulling him by the hand like a teenager sneaking her boyfriend inside while her parents were at work. The hallway camera caught them next, his hands on her waist, her fingers in his hair, the desperate, hungry way they kissed against the wall where our wedding photos hung. I watched my wife, lead another man toward our bedroom with the enthusiasm she hadn't shown me in months. The bedroom camera captured everything. I'll spare you the details, but I watched it all. Every second, every betrayal, every position, every whispered endearment that should have been mine. They were on my bed, on the sheets I'd bought, in the room I'd painted her favorite color, under the ceiling fan I'd installed on our anniversary. The audio was the worst part. Not the physical sounds. Those just made me nauseous. It was their conversation afterward, as they lay tangled in sheets I'd be burning later. She told him about me, mocked me, called me predictable and boring and too trusting. She laughed about how I had no idea, how I was too busy playing with pipes and wires to notice what was happening in my own house. "What if he finds out?" the man asked, and I could hear concern in his voice. Not guilt, just self-preservation. "He won't," Sarah replied with absolute confidence. "He's working until 9 tonight. Besides, even if he suspected something, he'd never actually do anything about it. He's too nice, too afraid of being alone." They made plans for Saturday. Same time. "He's working overtime again," she told him. "We'll have all afternoon." I sat in my truck until the video ended, until they'd dressed and he'd left, until she'd stripped the bed and started the washer. Then I threw up in the parking lot of a Burger King, heaving until there was nothing left but bile and rage. But rage wasn't useful. Not yet. Rage made you stupid, made you reactive, made you lose in court. What I needed was calculation. Planning I needed to be the husband she thought I was, predictable and boring, right up until the moment I wasn't. I went back to work, finished Mrs. Thomas's ductwork, smiled, made small talk, collected my check, went home that night and kissed my wife hello, pretending not to notice that she'd changed the sheets, that she'd lit candles to cover the smell, that she'd cooked my favorite meal out of guilt she probably didn't even fully feel. "How was your day?" she asked over dinner. "Long," I replied, cutting into the steak she'd made. Mrs. Thomas's ductwork was a nightmare. Traffic on the 405 was brutal. "Poor baby," she cooed, reaching over to squeeze my hand. The same hand that had been all over another man 6 hours earlier. That night, as she slept beside me, freshly showered, wearing the pajamas I'd bought her last Christmas, I stared at the ceiling and planned Saturday. She thought I'd be working. She thought I'd be gone until 9. She thought she knew me. Saturday, 9 p.m. My house, my bed, their little secret. They had no idea I'd be waiting. Friday night, I told Sarah I'd picked up an emergency job for Saturday. "Mrs. Rodriguez, you remember her? Her whole system's down. She's got family coming in for a quinceañera, gonna be there most of the day, probably until late." I sold it perfectly. The frustrated sigh, the eye roll, the apology for ruining our weekend that we both knew we wouldn't have spent together anyway. Her eyes lit up, though she tried to hide it. "Oh, that's okay, babe," she responded, barely containing her excitement. "I'll probably just catch up on some reading. Maybe see if Jen wants to grab lunch." Jen was in Miami for her daughter's college tour. Sarah knew that. I knew that. We both stood there lying to each other's faces like it was the most natural thing in the world. Saturday morning, I left at 7, kissed her goodbye. She was still in bed, feigning sleep, but I could tell by her breathing she was awake. I drove to the 7-Eleven 2 blocks away and parked behind the building. Called Mrs. Rodriguez and told her I'd had a family emergency, would have to reschedule. She was understanding. I wasn't really listening. My neighbor, Derek, Tom's younger brother, good kid, went through a nasty divorce himself last year, was my eyes on the ground. I'd told him just enough. "I think Sarah's having an affair. I need to know when someone shows up at my house today." He didn't ask questions, just nodded with the grim understanding of a man who'd been there. "I got you, brother," he said simply. I spent the morning in my truck drinking coffee that turned cold, checking and rechecking the camera feeds. Sarah got up around 9, showered for 45 minutes, shaved everything judging by the time she spent, put on the lingerie I'd found in her drawer, did her hair and makeup like she was going to a wedding, then changed into casual clothes over it all, a performance of normalcy in case any neighbors saw her. At 10:35, Derek texted, "Black Camaro just pulled up." I watched on my phone as the garage door opened, watched him walk in like he owned the place, watched them embrace in my kitchen, her legs wrapping around him as he lifted her onto the counter where we ate breakfast every morning. I waited. Let them get comfortable. Let them make their way to the bedroom. Let them think they were safe. At 10:55, I drove home, parking right in my driveway. No sneaking, no subterfuge. I walked to my front door with my keys in hand, listening to the sounds carrying through the walls. My walls. My house. The place I'd bought with the sweat of my back and the skill of my hands, now echoing with another man's grunts and my wife's performance. I stood in my own foyer, looking at the pictures on the wall. Our wedding, vacations, that Christmas where she'd surprised me with tools I'd been eyeing for months. In every photo, she was smiling. In every photo, I believed it. The sounds from upstairs reached a crescendo, then quiet murmuring, laughing, the creak of the bed as they repositioned. Round 2 was starting. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge, might as well, I'd paid for it, and sat at the kitchen table where Sarah had been wrapped around him 30 minutes ago. I drank it slowly, methodically, tasting nothing, just waiting, building the cold that would carry me through what came next. Then I heard her say his name, Jason, soft and breathy, the way she used to say mine back when she still pretended to love me. Jason. Now he had a name to go with the face I was about to rearrange. I set the empty bottle on the counter, careful not to make too much noise. Walked up the stairs I'd recarpeted last summer because Sarah said the old carpet was dated. Each step was measured, controlled. No rage. Not yet. Rage was sloppy. This needed to be precise. I stood outside my bedroom door, closed but not locked, they were that comfortable, and listened to my wife with another man in the bed I'd bought, in the house I'd paid for, in the life I'd built for us. When I heard her say his name again, I turned the doorknob. The door swung open, and time crystallized. Every detail burned itself into my memory with photographic clarity. Sarah's eyes going from closed to wide in less than a second. Jason, muscular, younger than me, exactly the type I'd feared I'd lost her to, scrambling backward like a crab, his mouth opening and closing without sound. The sheets, my sheets, tangled around them like evidence at a crime scene. "Get up," I said, and my voice came out steady, calm. The voice I used with difficult customers. Professional. Sarah grabbed for the comforter, trying to cover herself, as if modesty mattered now. "David, I can explain," she started, her voice high and panicked. "Get up," I repeated, cutting her off. Jason found his voice. "Look, man, I didn't know," he began, hands raised defensively. The laugh that came out of me was sharp enough to cut glass. "Didn't know? You didn't know she was married? In a house full of wedding photos? In a bed with men's clothes in the closet?" He moved toward his clothes, scattered on my floor, and I stepped forward. Not threatening, just present. "No, you leave like you are," I commanded. "You can't," he protested. "I can. I will. This is my house. You're trespassing," I stated flatly. "The only reason I'm not calling the cops right now is because I want you to walk out that front door so everyone can see exactly what kind of man you are." Sarah tried again, tears streaming down her face. "David, please, let's talk about this," she pleaded. "We're past talking," I interrupted, pulling out my phone. They both flinched like I was pulling a gun. "See? I've got cameras, Sarah. 3 weeks of footage, you two on Thursday, last Saturday, the Wednesday before that. All of it in HD, all of it with audio." The color drained from her face. Jason stood frozen, naked, looking between us like he was calculating his chances of getting past me. He was bigger, younger, stronger, but I had something he didn't. Nothing left to lose. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued in that deadly calm voice. "You're both walking out that front door, right now, as you are." "David, no!" Sarah's voice cracked. "Please, the neighbors." "Should have thought about the neighbors before you started bringing him in the house they watched me build," I shot back. Jason made his move, trying to grab his jeans. I kicked them toward the door. "I said no," I warned. "This is insane," he started to argue. "Insane?" The calm finally cracked. "Insane? You want to know what's insane? Working 60-hour weeks so my wife can stay home and meet strangers? That's insane. Paying the mortgage on a house that's become a brothel? That's insane. Lying next to someone every night who whispers another man's name in their sleep? That's insane." I grabbed Jason by the arm, not violent, just firm, and started walking him toward the door. He could have fought back, probably should have, but shame and shock are powerful paralyzers. Sarah followed, wrapping the sheet around herself, begging, bargaining, trying every manipulation in her arsenal. "David, I love you," she cried desperately. "It was a mistake. We can work through this." "You love me?" I opened the front door. Broad daylight. Saturday afternoon. The Johnsons were washing their car across the street. Mrs. Patterson was tending her garden perfect. "You love me so much you were laughing about how stupid I am? How boring? How predictable?" I shoved Jason out first. He stumbled onto the porch, hands covering himself, looking like a man trying to disappear into the ground. Then Sarah, still clutching the sheet. "David, please!" she begged one more time. "This is my house," I announced, loud enough for the gathering neighbors to hear. "Bought with my money, maintained with my work, and you turned it into this." I gestured at them. "Everyone should know what kind of people you are." Car doors slammed. Phones came out. Sarah tried to run back inside, but I blocked the door. Your car keys are on the kitchen counter. Your clothes are in the bedroom. You can come get them when the divorce lawyer arranges it, I told her coldly. I went inside, locked the door, and listened to the chaos outside. Jason running to his Camaro, Sarah screaming at him to wait, to help her. But he was already peeling out, leaving her standing in my driveway in nothing but a sheet, surrounded by neighbors she'd smiled at for years while betraying everything they thought they knew about us. The police came eventually. Sarah had called them, claiming I'd assaulted them, thrown them out, was having some kind of breakdown. I invited the officers in, showed them the footage on my laptop, just enough to prove infidelity, not enough to be gratuitous. Explained that I'd asked them to leave my property after discovering them in my bed, never touched them beyond guiding them to the door. The older cop, wedding ring on his finger, looked at me with something between pity and respect. "You need them off your property?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I confirmed. They made Sarah leave, gave her 10 minutes to grab essentials while supervised. She couldn't look at me, kept saying she was sorry, that we could fix this, that she loved me. But love doesn't look like what I'd seen on those cameras. Love doesn't laugh at someone's pain before they even know they're hurting. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed, stripped down to the mattress now, everything else in garbage bags by the curb, and felt the silence. Not peaceful silence. The kind that comes after an explosion, when your ears are still ringing and the dust hasn't settled. By morning, she wasn't my wife anymore, and the world knew exactly why. The divorce was surgical. My lawyer, Patricia, a woman who'd been through her own cheating spouse situation, wielded the camera footage like a scalpel. California's a no-fault state, but judges still have discretion in property division when there's documented infidelity. The house stayed mine. I'd bought it before marriage, kept it in my name, paid the mortgage from my separate business account. Smart moves I'd made for tax reasons that ended up saving me from losing everything. Sarah got her clothes, her car, and the contents of her personal checking account. About $3,000 she'd saved from the allowance I'd been giving her, no alimony. No settlement, no claim to the business I'd built while she was busy building her affair. Jason disappeared entirely. Turns out he was married too, with 2 kids and a pregnant wife who found out about everything when the neighborhood Facebook page lit up with photos and videos of his naked sprint to his Camaro. Last I heard, he'd moved back in with his mother in Arizona. Sarah moved in with her sister initially, but that lasted exactly 1 week before the judgment and whispers became too much. Then her parents, but her father, old-school Italian, believed in honor above all else, could barely look at her. She got a job at a department store, then a restaurant, then disappeared from social media entirely after the comment sections became too brutal. She wrote me letters, long, rambling things about how sorry she was, how she'd been going through something, how Jason had pursued her, manipulated her, made her feel young again, every excuse except accountability. I threw them away unopened after the 3rd one. The return address kept changing, her sisters, her parents, addresses I didn't recognize, watching her orbit collapse in real time through postmarks. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into her at a gas station. She was thinner, older somehow, wearing clothes I recognized from our marriage. She tried to approach me, but I just finished pumping my gas and left. In the rearview mirror, I saw her standing by pump 3, shoulders shaking, holding a gas can for a car that probably wasn't even hers anymore. The neighbors still wave when I come home. Some of them, especially the men, give me a different kind of nod now. Not pity, respect. Like I'm part of some club nobody wants to join, but everyone recognizes Mrs. Patterson brought me cookies last week, patted my hand and said, "You did what you had to do, dear." Tom and Derek invite me over for beers every Friday, never asking if I'm okay, just making sure I'm not alone. "You handled it like a man," Derek told me once. "Most guys would have done something stupid. You did it smart." I renovated the bedroom entirely. New paint, gray this time, my choice. New furniture, new everything. It's mine now in a way it never was when it was ours. The cameras are gone. Don't need them anymore. Trust isn't something I'm planning to hand out again anytime soon. The business is thriving. Turns out when you're not constantly worried about what's happening at home, you can focus on work. Hired 2 employees, bought a new truck, started bidding on commercial contracts I wouldn't have had the confidence for before. Success, I've learned, is the best revenge, not because she can see it, but because I can. Last week, her mother called. "Sarah's living in a studio apartment in Riverside," she told me, her voice heavy with disappointment. "Working 2 jobs, trying to rebuild. She wanted me to tell you she's sorry, that she's learned her lesson, that maybe you could find it in your heart to forgive her." I told her mother what I'd told Sarah in the last text I'd ever send her. Forgiveness and reconciliation aren't the same thing. I forgive her because holding on to anger was poisoning me. But she made her choice that day she brought another man into our bed. And choices, real choices, have permanent consequences. "I understand," her mother replied quietly before hanging up. "I sleep well now, in the center of my king-size bed, spreading out like it's mine, because it is. The house is quiet, but it's honest quiet. No whispered phone calls, no fake moans, no lies dressed up as love. And sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd never installed those cameras. If I'd just continued being the good, trusting husband, working my overtime, believing her excuses. She'd probably still be here, still be lying, still be treating our marriage like a cover story for whatever life she was really living. The thought doesn't make me sad anymore. It makes me grateful. Grateful I found out. Grateful I had the spine to do something about it. Grateful that the pain was finite, with an end date and exit strategy. In the end, she lost everything. I only lost someone who never deserved me in the first place.